Are you a founder or leader who's stuck in the day to day grind and just feels like everything revolves around your decisions, your actions, and you're the bottleneck to everything? Keep watching because this video will help. One of the questions that I get asked all the time is, what is the difference between AI agents and traditional automation? And honestly, if you're asking this question right now, you're asking the wrong question. I'm going to dive specifically into a couple things here on this video that focus on how to ask the right questions and how to think about building these systems. The first analogy that I want to use is thinking about a car. It's a lot like asking, well, should I build a car and do I really need brakes? Should I include wheels and tires? Do I really need an engine? And yeah, you're going to get a car kind of, but it's going to look like this and it's not going to be very helpful. The real answer, stop comparing all the different things that you could do and start combining them into one, because the reality is it's kind of like a chain. If you only have one link, you basically have a carabiner, and not even that. But once you start building the links of the chain, it gets stronger. And this is the same thing with systems and automation today. If you combine traditional automation and some code and leverage agents and all the features and all the attributes that are part of that, you get a much stronger system. I want to take a deep dive for each one of these. So the best time to use traditional automation is when predictability matters. If you provide the same input, you're going to get the same output and it's going to be the same every time. It's also going to be great if you want to leverage logic, this, then that, or I want to route to specific areas. All of that is going to be great for traditional automation. But here's the catch. If you're only using traditional automation, you're going to run into a couple of problems. For example, it is extremely brittle. Now, I've been building automated systems for over 10 years, and I can completely attest to the fact that if you build a system and you automate it with only traditional automation, which used to be all that we had, another word for this is deterministic automation. So I'm going to use that throughout this presentation as well. But it becomes very brittle, which means anytime you need to make a change to your process, you then have to update your automation. When you try to scale this across teams, you get new people in, you get turnover, you get people forgetting how the automation was built to begin with. They make a change, and all of a sudden the automation breaks. I see this day in and day out. So that is a huge downside if you're only using traditional automation. The other downside is that you can only use structured data. So for years, we had let's collect data from a form. Let's have drop downs in the form so that it's exact information that we can get. And then we can use logic to route based on the options that are selected. So that really limits what you can do and what you can automate from that side of things. Scaling is also very limited because as your processes grow, as your systems grow and develop, it is very difficult to scale up traditional automation and still make them manageable and maintainable systems. So what you end up having to do is break this off into a whole bunch of pieces and call different things. And then you've got to remember how they were all connected, and you're sending webhooks from one to another. It's very complicated, and you definitely need more people to manage those systems and just do that as your systems grow. Okay, so let's talk code blocks. You'll definitely want to use code blocks when you need data transforming. It's amazing at that. You can take huge sets of data, like say getting information back from an API, and then you run that through a block of code with some functions. It's going to do the same thing every time, and it's going to transform that data from one format to another format. You cannot get faster or better than code for this. If you try to do it through loops with traditional automation, it's slow and it's costly. You have to pay for each operation that goes through this. Another perfect time when to use code blocks is with functions or where logic can be consolidated. And you want to say, I want to do a whole bunch of stuff. I want to build some functions around handling this information, handling this data, and I want to run it through these things over and over and over and over again without having to map step, action, 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 step, etc., and make it this super complicated workflow when you could just have one code block, run it through, get an output from your input, and you're good to go. Now, It's very difficult to only build automation with code blocks. The first thing is you don't have any decision making with code. It's not like AI or an agent. There's no judgment calls. You're going to have to like go in and write it just like traditional automation. You have to set the logic and work with that logic every single time. And honestly, it sucks maintaining code. That's why developers have been in such demand for so many years, because once you write a bunch of code, only developers can maintain and manage that code to keep things rolling. Other than that, anytime you want to make a change, you have to go to the developer and they have to change it. And once your code gets really complicated, well, then you need testing and you need unit tests and you need functional tests and you need all these things to happen within the code to keep these systems running. It's a nightmare. It's not great. That's where low code and no code, the promise of that has always come in. And again, that's going back to the traditional automation with there are some pros, but also downsides where you don't only just want to use that. Now, agents are new. These are powered by AI, and it gives things like dynamic decision making from context, which means if you feed it the right information, it can look at that information, look at its instructions, and make decisions based on the context that you've given it and the instructions that it has. No other code and no other traditional automation could do this in the past. And it starts opening up some brand new doors for what you can automate within your systems and within your operations. It can also deal with unstructured data. So being able to get in and say, hey, review this email or this support ticket or this photo of a handwritten form, or even say, review this PDF. It's going to take that unstructured data and actually know what to do with it, which is amazing because you don't have to write a bunch of code or go through some rigorous system of trying to get the data out of it and then structure it. It can do that all in one prompt, basically. Another great place is for when workflows need to be adaptive, which essentially means if something changes in the process or the workflow itself, the agents can adapt. This is, again, something new that we didn't really have as an option in the past. One of my favorite ways to leverage agents is to slap a chat interface on top of it and start chatting with whatever context and whatever instructions and whatever assets I give it to interact with this workflow. And suddenly I can have it start doing things, talk about adaptive. It's really flexible based on what kind of chats come in. It's going to follow its instructions and work through exactly what it needs to based on the workflow and even trigger other agents or trigger other steps. And finally, you'll want to use agents when you need it to call other systems without it being strictly instructed to do in a specific sequence. So what this means is you can give an agent access to things like adding rows in a Google Sheet or pulling specific rows from Airtable or writing an email draft. All of those are tools that the agent can use, but it's not necessarily saying do this and then do this and then do this in a sequential order. It's saying here are the tools that you have to work with. Take these tools and based on your instructions and the context that's given, and decide when to use them and in what order and whether to use them or not. And sometimes that can be really good. And sometimes it can be a challenge and you need to adjust your prompts. But if you're only using agents, you are going to run into a number of issues. So the first one is it's non-deterministic, which means you can give it the same input, but the output will change. And in some scenarios, this is exactly what you want. In many scenarios, this is not. So it's very difficult to build predictable systems with agents only. If you're only using agents, it is expensive and it's slow. Every time you use an agent and every time an agent uses a tool and every bit of context that you give it, it's all stacking tokens. And every time the agent thinks about something, it's stacking more tokens. And every time it makes a call to the LLM, to the AI brain, so to speak, it's charging you for the tokens used. So if you give it a ton of context and you have it do all this processing, your token count is just going to go and go and go. And it can take 30 seconds every single time it's processing. Not all the time, but it is slow compared to code or traditional automation, and it is expensive compared to code or traditional automation. A final thing that you can run into if you're only using agents is that you can ask it to do too much. It can get confused. You can give it so much data that it's just going to not know what to do with itself and not really be sure on how to handle all the things that you're asking it to do. Large sets of data are a problem. The answer to all of this is simply to build with all three. The traditional automation side of things gives you a great workflow foundation. What's the trigger? Let's have it go in and do a couple steps. The code blocks give it the ability to parse and pre-process the data before it makes it to an agent. What this means is if you're getting a bunch of data back from an API in the traditional automation workflow, and then all of a sudden you just send that to an agent without any pre-processing, your tokens are going to be huge and your ability to confuse the agent is going to be very high because you're sending it too much information, too much context than it needs to know. So what you can do is use traditional automation to make an API call, use a code block to transform that data from all that data down to structured, specific data that just the agent needs. And then you leverage the agent to be the scalable decision maker. So it has just the right amount of context that it needs, the right instructions, and the right tools to do the job. So let's go through an example of this. Let's set out a problem that is not an uncommon problem for many businesses. Let's say that your team wants to track time in a time tracking platform. And in most or probably all time tracking platforms, reports can be generated. And that's not a big deal. Let's go in and grab reports. But the issue is you need to ask your team members to say, hey, let's go grab these reports and then analyze those reports so that we know what's happening. So let's set out a few requirements in this problem and see if it resonates as you're listening to this. I would like to see every day before anyone starts work, I want to pull the data for a month to date. I want to determine which clients we've worked on that we've spent over 30 hours for. I want to determine the top 5 clients that are nearing 30 hours and get a list of those. I want to show how many hours each team member has logged, again, month to date. And I want to show the total number of hours that we've logged across all clients and all team members month to date. I want to make this process as affordable as possible so I'm not wasting money or time or paying for hours. And I want this to be extremely flexible. So if I do need to change some of these requirements, I don't want to have to hire somebody to rebuild all of this or have it break and I'm not getting my analysis and I'm not getting my reports. Most importantly, I need to trust this. I need this to be predictable. So these don't sound super complicated, right? There's a bunch of requirements, but these are pretty straightforward. I would like data pulled from a system. I would like it analyzed, and I would like to see the outputs based on those kind of things. And if you're running a services type business and you're tracking time, this is a pretty common ask. Like you would want this information to be actionable so that your project managers know what to work on and know how to prioritize and know how to resource manage. And your leadership team knows where things are at and can help make better decisions. If you're just pulling reports, you're just getting numbers. It's the analysis that's tricky. Now, the problem with this is it should be simple, but it's not. This is actually a super complicated problem. And what we're talking about here is the stuff that kind of is the gray area in business operations. So it's the gaps that we have in business that everybody has, every team and every business has these gaps. And our options are, well, we can hire somebody to fill those gaps, or we can try to build a system, a custom system to fill those gaps, or we just ignore them. So let's look at how this plays out in a number of different scenarios. If we didn't combine these things, this is what we're going to run into. So solution one is we don't actually try to automate anything and we just hire somebody to fill this in. And it wasn't too long ago where this was the only option we had. When we had a problem, we'd hire somebody. But if we look at this, let's go requirement at a time. Does it meet the requirements? Well, every day before anybody starts work, pull the month to date. It is probably not going to happen. It would be unlikely that we can find somebody who's going to get up super early before anybody else starts and pull these reports and analyze them and let that be their job. Now, can we determine which clients are over 30 hours, the top 5 clients, show how many hours, and show the total number of hours month to date? 100%. We can do that. Do we make this as affordable as possible? This is the least affordable solution. So I'm going to give that a big red X. No, it does not meet that requirements. Is it flexible in case we need to change the requirements? 100%. We would just tell somebody that we hired to make these changes, and hopefully they would make those changes. Is it predictable? Well, here I put a warning sign because the reality is it might not be predictable. It really depends on the human that you hired to do this. There's a few other issues that are also included in this that we need to think about when we're building systems. So one is we got to account for doing the training. If we're hiring somebody to do this job, then we have to build the training, we have to test the training, we have to do the training. It's a huge cost. Another downside, if it's just this one simple analysis, it is not realistic to hire even a part-time data analyst to do this. You would need to hire somebody, I don't know, for an hour, or you have to find enough work of this type to hire somebody part-time or full-time, and then you still have all these downsides. Even though you're hiring somebody, you still are paying them to build the process. And if they're not great at building processes or systems, this is also going to be an issue. Because it's their job, they're likely going to do this manually over and over and over again. You've hired somebody to do this role, to do this analysis manually. They're not in the mindset that they're going to go, oh, yeah, let me figure out an easier way to do that and lose their job security. So already that's a big strike against this solution. More likely than not, this is going to create very low employee satisfaction. Can you imagine being that person whose job is to show up super early, analyze time tracking reports, and that's the only thing you do? It's going to be terrible. And with any hire, our final thing that we need to account for is turnover. What happens if they get a better job offer? What happens if their employee satisfaction is super low? They're going to leave, and then you have to replace them. And there's huge costs associated with that. We're now going to look at our second solution, or a second option here, which is using traditional automation. Now we can get the data, and with a no-code automation tool like Make, which is super powerful and can do a ton of things, we can get the data from the time tracking system, but then taking that super complex API data returned and making this simple in traditional automation, we hit a roadblock right away. And so if we look at the requirements, can this run every day before somebody starts work? 100%. It is very, very difficult to determine which clients are going to be over 30 hours. There's no easy way to process this in a tool like Make or Zapier. Can we determine the top 5 clients? Nope. Can we show the total number of hours month to date? Yes, we can do that, but only because that's a simple value that's passed back from the time tracking system. This is not as affordable as possible because it's not meeting any of the requirements or most of the requirements. And it's definitely not flexible. And the only way it would be predictable is if we could execute this all the way through, which we can't. So this is just not a viable solution. It is not going to give us our desired outcome. And the reason for this is one of the reasons that I set up this scenario for this presentation is because we're not able to easily automate stuff like this, even though it sounds like we should be able to, without humans, at least in the past. So if we look at a code only, this solution works, right? Look at this code though. Is anybody maintaining this outside of a developer? Heck no. So it will run every day before everybody starts. We can get all the data points that we want. Is it as affordable as possible? Maybe, maybe not. It's going to force you to maintain a server. You've got to maintain people, etc. Is it flexible? No, it's not. And to change it, it's a problem and it's a pain in the butt, but it is predictable. So we can basically get the job done, but it's not a great solution. It does require a software engineer to build. Even if you're writing with AI, it's still going to require the expertise to know how to do things correctly. It's going to require a server. It is 100% not user friendly. There's no front end, and it's not flexible and it's not scalable. So we're out on that one too. Now, the fourth solution is only using AI agents. And it's possible. Like this works. Like here's an AI agent. It runs at midnight. It's going to analyze the time data. It's going to get the data. It's even going to send a Slack message. But the issue is it's not predictable. So we got all of these greens. Is it as affordable as possible? The AI costs are going to get up there because of how this is processing, and there's no pre-processing with the code or the data back from the API. It is flexible, but it's not predictable. In fact, it's going to be anything but predictable. And most often, a setup like this, the agent's going to get super confused. So this will get the job done, but maybe only what, 10% of the time, 20% of the time, even if it's 60% of the time, is that acceptable? I would say no, because I wouldn't be able to trust it. So the issues are that we're sending all of the data that we're getting back from the API directly to the agent and asking it to process stuff. That's data overload, and it's going to be a problem. The agent is asked to do too many things at once. We've asked it for all of those requirements. We've asked it to get the data. We've asked it to structure a Slack message. We've asked it to send the Slack message. It's going to get confused. It is not scalable as the data set grows. If you're working on more projects, more clients, more team members, by the end of the month, your data set is going to be so huge, you're likely going to surpass the context window of the AI itself. The bottom line here is we've got to account for huge hallucination rates, and it may look like it's real data, but unless somebody goes back and confirms, we've got a real problem on our hands because we're telling the team, hey, look at this data, and it could be made up. All right, so let's look at the real answer here. Solution 5, we're going to combine traditional automation, we're going to combine code and agents all together to give us the exact solution that we're looking for. So at the beginning, we have some traditional automation. These are going to be the green boxes. The AI calls are going to be the blue boxes, and the red box is code. So at the beginning, we have traditional automation that has a trigger that runs every day at midnight. Amazing. That's exactly what we want. Nobody has to wake up early. Then we're going to make a simple AI call. And this is just asking the AI to get the start and end dates and format it in a specific way. It costs a fraction of a penny. This is way easier than writing code for the most part, and it's super flexible. We just need to change a prompt if we want to change the format. For the API call, again, traditional automation. Let's go to the time tracking platform. Let's make the API call. Let's get the data. Now here, we're going to float in the code block. And the code block is about a 25-line piece of code that takes the API data and reformats it and structures it down into just exactly the right structure, the right format, and the right data and context that the AI agent needs. So when we send that to the AI agent, it's going to get exactly what it needs with as few tokens as possible, and it's going to have a very clear prompt. In fact, the entire prompt is in the note above the agent right there. So find any clients that are over 30 hours, find the top 5 clients that are getting close to 30 hours, list the user's hours, and show the total number of hours, then send us a Slack message. That's it. We have predictability because we've tuned that agent way down in temperature, which means it's not creative. And we've given it only very clear data, and we've asked it to do very clear things, and we're not overwhelming it with anything. And we can test this out, and every single time it's going to use the data over and over and over again to represent those and send us a Slack message, and that works. So we have, with this, all the requirements. Every day it runs, we've got determine which clients are over 30 hours, top 5 clients nearing 30 hours, show how many hours each team member has logged, the total number of hours month to date. It's as affordable as possible. So in test and running this, it runs for about 30 seconds for this entire workflow, and it costs about 3 cents in total. So there is no way that we could ever hire a data analyst to get anywhere close to that. And we can see that all the other solutions with this requirement set fail for many reasons. It's also extremely flexible. So if we need to change the requirements, we can just edit the prompt in the last one. And it's most importantly predictable on all of this. So we have started using this solution at the beginning of this year. We have not touched it with our own team, and it's run perfectly. We've made a couple prompt updates to get a couple extra things, but we've never had to fix it. We've never had to iterate improvements because it was failing or was unpredictable. And this has completely changed the way that we look at our hours, and we no longer have to have that gap in our business. Okay, so let's dive a little bit deeper and talk about what happens when we want to make a change to a workflow like this. The COO goes into the time tracking software, makes those changes, doesn't realize that's going to affect the imaginary workflows that we're working through in this. Now we have a bunch of our internal time tracking entries that are appearing in the over 30 hours and the top 5 under 30 hours because that's coming from the API. So this is not helpful for the PMs or the leadership team. And in fact, it's making it worse because there's now data that's being excluded in the top 5 because it's the internal hours that we're tracking. So solution 1, we hired a data analyst. This just doesn't work. All the COO did is create more work for the data analyst. What this essentially means is, well, what happens when more changes are made? What happens when the data analyst needs to take a day off? Pretty soon we'll need to hire more data analysts because all these changes to our processes are coming in from different areas and people just need to catch up. And those people are being paid handsomely. And this is how business has scaled and grown for so many years. But this is not the way. Solution 2, traditional automation. We couldn't make this work with the original requirements, so there's no way to make it work with the COO requirements now. Using code only, the COO innocently didn't know this would break anything, but now it's broken. So now we have to hire a development person to come in, make the changes, and hopefully the next time around, we can know that we've learned our lesson on changing processes. But spoiler alert, there is going to be a next time. Somebody's going to change something. Somebody's going to rename something. Somebody's going to add a new column. It's going to break. If we're only using AI agents, the COO can say something like, well, I'll just update the prompt for the agent. And while this is the right idea, it's already kind of a broken system if we're only using agents because the COO would go in and we didn't have predictability to begin with. And now it's just a longer prompt, making it even worse. But our solution, when we combine traditional automation code and agents, this works. And the reason that it works is because the COO can still say, hey, don't worry, I'm going to update the prompt. But this time it actually works because the prompt with a couple of plain language lines in the prompt can actually fix it. So for example, the COO could add these 2 lines into the prompt of the final agent in the sequence of the workflow that combine traditional automation code and AI agents to things like don't include Acme code. This is us, not a client. Don't include without client. This isn't important. And with those 2 lines alone, it is no longer including that information in it. No coding, no major breaks, nothing. It is absolutely incredible how fast we can change this. And more importantly, the COO can be empowered to make this change based on the change that they wanted to make with the system as a whole. The real difference behind all of this is that businesses and processes and systems need to change. They're always going to change. You're either dealing with always putting out fires and things breaking and brittle systems and getting frustrated that you tried to automate in the first place, but knowing that you can't afford just hiring people to do the job versus, man, it's sure nice to have a day off sometimes because the systems can run without me. And if we do need to make a change, we have redundancy. We have multiple people that are trained to be able to make those changes. The final thing that I wanted to talk about was selecting the right tools for the job. There are many tools out there. The top 3 that we hear about a lot right now is Make.com, Zapier, and N8N. Now, N8N is in the blue, and you can see the search interest over time, up to date, where this is at. And it's crystal clear that there is a huge surge in interest in N8N. And there's a reason for that, is because it takes the concept of this entire presentation of traditional automation, code, and AI agents and makes it extremely easy to work together. The screenshots of the workflows that I created earlier outside of the first one was Make, but the other ones were N8N. And there's a huge reason for this having such a huge rise. Zapier has amazing SEO, giant marketing budget, and it's doing amazingly well with revenue. It was early to the market of automation, but not to AI agents. And while it does have code blocks, it is extremely cumbersome to work with. Make.com came around and said, hey, we've got a better user interface. And a lot of people jumped ship from Zapier to Make, and for good reason. It gave additional functionality that was very difficult in Zapier, but it did not include code. Now, N8N is relatively new to the scene. It's been around for years, it's well funded, and it's extremely powerful. It's being consistently updated almost weekly. Every 2 weeks, there's updates coming through this. Absolutely mind boggling. It's also been the first to market with AI agents where you can build something extremely powerful, extremely quick, in an easy to use interface that almost anybody can learn. And they made the choice to go open source. So you can actually buy a server, put the code on the server, and run your own N8N server without limitations. Mind boggling and game changing. Now, you've got to know how to run all that. So I would still recommend the cloud version for most companies. But here's why it matters. Just to give an analogy on tools. Yes, we can use screwdrivers to dig holes. Is it as effective as a shovel? Hell no. We can use Make or Zapier to build workflows and agents. Is it as effective as N8N? Hell no. And that is the key. So whenever you're working with developers or talking to people, you have to pick the right tool for the job. And the right tool today is going to be a tool like N8N. When you're trying to build and deploy solutions and automations across your departments, speed matters, being able to train, and the amount of time and learning it takes to be able to successfully build and maintain these things, that matters. And the features that are included matter. So even though you've got certain things in Zapier already, or maybe you've built some things in Make, that doesn't mean you can't go to N8N and start replacing some of your old workflows with more scalable solutions that combine all three. That is my presentation. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this. Hopefully this helped give you a perspective when you're thinking about building systems to help get out of the day-to-day grind. This is the way to think about that. Systems need to incorporate all of these things these days and not just one of them. Start asking, how do I combine these solutions to make powerful workflows, and stop comparing between each of them?